So Chapter 4, Lesson 8 is divide mixed numbers. And when we're dividing mixed numbers, it's not any different than when we were dividing a whole number by a fraction, or just dividing fractions. We're still going to multiply by the reciprocal. But the only difference here, when we're dealing with mixed numbers, in order for us to flip that fraction, we need to change it to an improper fraction. Very good. So here on the warm-up, it says, you have a shelf that holds 25.5 pounds. How many 1 1/4 pound books can the shelf hold? So here, what we're going to do is we are going to take that 25.5 and see how many 1 1/4 chunks we can take out of that. So we are dividing 25.5 divided by 1 1/4. So the first thing we're going to do before we keep change flip is we're going to change both of those mixed numbers to improper fractions. Is everybody clear? So for the first one, 2 times 25 is 50 plus 1 is 51. So we have 51 over 2. And then we are going to divide. Now we need to change this to an improper fraction. So 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So we end up with 5/4. So now we can keep, change, flip. Okay? So we've got 51 halves. And we're going to change the division to multiplication. And the 5/4 flips to the reciprocal, which is 4/5. Very good. And now we can just multiply straight across. But before we multiply, we can simplify. So here, 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 4 divided by 2 is 2. Can I simplify anything else? No. So now when we multiply straight across, we end up with 102 over 5. Bless you. And now we're going to change this back to a mixed number. So how many times does 5 go into 10? Twice. With how many left over? 0. So how many times does 5 go into 2? 0. With how many left over? 2. So here we're going to end up with 20 2/5. Now the question is, how many 1 1/4 books can we fit on the shelf? Now this is 20 2/5. We can't cut a book in pieces, right, to put it on the shelf. So here, how many books? 20 books. Is everybody clear? And make sure you label, because this is a word problem, you label your final answer. So we are going to divide a mixed number by a fraction. Divide a mixed number by a fraction. So here it says dividing mixed numbers is similar to dividing fractions. To divide mixed numbers, you're going to write the mixed numbers as improper fractions and then divide as with fractions. So first you change them to improper fractions, and then you divide like normal. So for this first example, we have 1 3/4 divided by 2/5. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the 1 3/4 to 7/4. Change it to an improper fraction. And now we can keep, change, flip. Multiplying by the reciprocal, we have 7/4 times 2/5 becomes 5 halves. And of course, we can't simplify anything here before we multiply. When we multiply straight across, we end up with 35/8. Once you get that final answer, then you're going to get your final answer by changing that improper fraction back to a mixed number. All right, let's fill out these blanks here. For example 2, it says find 3 3/4 divided by 4/5. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change this mixed number to an improper fraction. So that's going to be 3 times 4 is 12, plus 3 is 15, and that goes over 4. And now we can keep change flip. So this becomes 15/4 times, we're going to flip the second fraction to the reciprocal. So that's going to be 5/4. And it looks like we can't simplify anything before we multiply. Gosh darn it, right? Does everybody see that? So 15 times 5 is 75. And then 4 times 4 is 16. And now we're just going to change that back to a mixed number. Very good. So let's see. Let's do this over here on the side. So we have 75 divided by 16. How many times does that go in there? So 75 divided by 16. So 16 goes into 75 4 times, with how many left over? 11, and then the denominator stays the same. Very good. Okay. So for the got it problems, problem A, we have 2 3/8 divided by 1/4. Make sure you are writing your original problem, okay? So 2 3/8, we're going to change that to an improper fraction. So 2 times 8 is 16, 17, 18, 19 eighths. And then we're going to divide that by 1/4. So now we can keep change flip. So we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So that's 19 eighths times 4/1. Okay? And now we can simplify before we multiply. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2. And now we can multiply straight across. So 19 times 1 is 19. 2 times 1 is 2. And this becomes, now we're changing this improper fraction back to a mixed number. So 2 goes into 19 9 times with how many left over? 1, and the denominator stays the same. Got it? All right. So let's take a look at example B. We'll do this one together, and I'll let you guys do C on your own. So here, we've got 2 1/2. The 2 1/2 becomes 5 halves, right? 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, so that's 5 halves. And we're going to divide that by 3/7. Okay? I don't want you, right now, I don't want you guys skipping any steps, okay? So now we can keep change flip, multiplying by the reciprocal. And we have 5 halves times, this becomes 7 thirds. And it does not look like we can simplify before we multiply. So 5 times 7 is 35. 2 times 3 is 6. And now we change back to a mixed number. So how many times does 6 go into 35? 5 times, with how many left over? So this becomes 5 and 5, 6. Very good. Here is your answer. Did you get it? All right, did everybody remember that you can simplify 3 and 45? Good, good. Simplifying before you multiply always makes it much easier, okay? Okay, so now we're going to divide by a mixed number. When we divide by a mixed number, do you think the rule is going to change?
I don't know.
I don't think so. Let's see here. To divide a mixed number by another mixed number, you're going to change both mixed numbers to improper fractions. Remember to simplify before you multiply, and then you just multiply like normal. So here we have 5 1/2 divided by 2 1/2. we're going to change both mixed numbers to improper fractions. So we have 11 1/2 divided by 5 halves. 11 halves divided by 5 halves. And now we can multiply by the reciprocal. Keep, change, flip. So the 11 halves stays the same. Division becomes multiplication. And the 5 halves becomes 2/5. Now we can simplify before we multiply. And we end up with 11/5. And then we change that 11/5 back to a mixed number. So we get 2 1/5. Okay? All right, let's do this one together. All right, so we have 4 2/3 divided by 1 3/4. So here, first thing we're going to do is we're going to change both mixed numbers to improper fractions. So 4 2/3 becomes 12, 13, 14 thirds divided by 4 plus 3 is 7 fourths. And now we're going to keep, change, flip. So we have 14 thirds. Division becomes multiplication. And then the 7 fourths becomes 4 sevenths. Very good. And now we can simplify before we multiply. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. 14 divided by 7 is 2. And we multiply straight across. So 2 times 4 is 8. And 3 times 1 is 3. And now we'll change that improper fraction back to a mixed number. So how many times does 3 go into 8? Twice. With how many left over? 2. And the denominator stays the same. So here we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. But the first thing we need to do is change both mixed numbers to improper fractions. So, for example, for problem D, we have 4 1/5 divided by 2 1/3. So that's going to be 5 times 4 is 20 plus 1, that's 21/5. Divided by the next one, that's going to be 6 7/3. And now we can multiply by the reciprocal. So we have 21/5 times the reciprocal of 7/3 is 3 sevenths. And now we can simplify before we multiply. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. And 21 divided by 7 is 3. So when we multiply straight across, we end up with 9/5. How many times does 5 go into 9? Once. With how many left over? 4. And the denominator stays the same. Got it? All right. What about this one? Let's see here. What do I do with that 8?
Make it 8 over 1.
Very good. We're just going to change it to a fraction just by putting it over 1. So now we're going to divide by, this one, change this to an improper fraction. That's 5 halves. And now we can multiply by the reciprocal. So that's 8 over 1 times 2/5. Can I simplify anything? No. So we're going to multiply straight across. So 8 times 2 is 16. 1 times 5 is 5. And now we'll change that back to a mixed number. How many times does 5 go into 16? 3 times. With how many left over? 1. And the denominator stays the same. There's your answer. So we're going to change the mixed numbers to improper fractions. So that's going to be 14/9 divided by 7/3. Then we're going to keep, change, flip. So 14/9 times the reciprocal of 7/3 is 3 sevenths. Simplify before we multiply. 7 divided by 7 is 1. 14 divided by 7, 2. And then we can also simplify the 3 and 9, dividing by 3. So that's going to be 1 here and 9 divided by 3 is 3. When we multiply straight across, 2 times 1 is 2, and 3 times 1 is 3. All right, example 5 says the average adult male panda, giant panda, weighs about 1 1/5 times as much as the average adult female. If the average weight of a male giant panda is 330 pounds, how much does the average female giant panda weigh? So here we are comparing we're taking the giant panda and we're dividing it by how many times as heavy it is than the female. Is everybody with me? So when we do that, we end up with 330 divided by 1 1/5. Now, changing this first one to a fraction just by putting it over 1, dividing by the improper fraction here, which is 6/5, and now we can multiply by the reciprocal. So 330 times 5/6, simplifying before we multiply, we end up with 275 over 1, which is 275 pounds, which is how much a female giant panda would weigh.